Hey historians, and welcome to your second lesson on the working conditions the working class people faced during the Industrial Revolution. During this lesson, we're going to do a bit of source work and Education Perfect on the working conditions people faced during the Industrial Revolution, and then particularly how they gained the rights, especially in the Education Perfect task. This lesson is located under the Working Conditions tab of the Industrial Revolution website. So let's have a look at your learning intentions and success criteria. So by the end of this lesson, you need to know the working conditions of people during the Industrial Revolution, and you need to be able to understand the working conditions of people during the Industrial Revolution from their perspective and how people gained rights at the workplace. So let's jump in with a bit of source work. We've got 4 sources that we need to cover, and you need to answer these in your books, and we're going to go through them together now. So source 1 is an extract from John C. Cobden's 1854 book, The White Slaves of England. The extract is a surgeon describing a 17-year-old dressmaker during the Industrial Revolution. So let's have a read of the source before we begin. So Frederick Tyrrell, surgeon to the London Hospital, St. Thomas's Hospital, mentions a case equally distressing. So a fair and delicate girl, about 17 years of age, was brought to witness in consequence of total loss of vision, so she went blind. She had experienced the train of symptoms which have been detailed to the fullest extent. On examination, both eyes were found disorganized, and recovery therefore was hopeless. She had been an apprentice as a dressmaker at the west end of town, and some time before her vision became affected, her general health had been materially deranged from too close confinement and excessive work. So she's being trapped in a little room. She's looking down at the needle and thread and concentrating for so long in that dark, small space that she's become blind. The immediate cause of her disease in the eyes was excessive and continued application to making mourning. She stated that she had been compelled to remain without changing her dress for 9 days and nights consecutively, that during this period she had been permitted only occasionally to rest on a mattress placed on the floor for an hour or two at a time, and that her meals were placed at her side, cut up, so that as little time as possible should be spent in their consumption. So her food was already cut up for her, so she didn't have to spend time chewing it, because that wasted, in the eyes of her boss, time. Witness regrets that he did not, in this and few other cases nearly as flagrant and distressing, induce the sufferers to appeal to a jury for compensation. So someone who was a witness saw this and regrets that they didn't act sooner. So is this source primary and secondary? Well, it is primary because the dressmaker was there during the Industrial Revolution, and even though this source is found in a book, the source is an extract, and it is her telling her story to a surgeon, so it is a primary source. When was the source created? We only have 1854. That was when it was created. Who created it? Sorry, it was John C. Cobden. You can also put down, though, the dressmaker, and also because it is being told to a surgeon, you can put them down as co-contributors as well. Why do you think the title of the book uses the word slaves? Because people were paid so little and made to work so hard that they essentially were slaves, and the working conditions is a good time to explore that. How did the girl become blind? Well, we know that she became blind by concentrating so long on the needle and thread of the dresses that she was making for hours and hours and hours upon constant days of work, and being stuck in a tiny little dark room as well. How long had it been since the girl had changed her clothes? So that is in here as well. Her dress for 9 days, so 9 days and 9 nights consecutively. She was wearing the same clothes for all that time. How often did the girl sleep? It says that here as well. I'm just going to find that again. That during that period she had remained on occasion to rest on a mattress placed on the floor for an hour or two at a time. So she only slept for 1 or 2 hours at a time. Number 8, she slept on a mattress on the floor. We just read that. Number 9, how large do you think her meals were? They probably weren't very large because she didn't have very long to eat them. Use evidence from the source to support your answer. Well, we know that they were already cut up as well. And they will be able to be placed on the floor. That's pretty much the only evidence we have to go off. So I don't think they were very big because they were already cut up as well. And you can obviously tell the boss doesn't really care about the workers, so they're probably not going to be very big. What does the source tell you about the working conditions women faced during the Industrial Revolution? They were very hard, they were very degrading, they were long and debilitating as well. Source 2. Now we've got an illustration of dressmakers during the Industrial Revolution from John C. Cobden's 1854 book, The White Slaves of England. So, is this source a primary or secondary source? Why? Well, I've done my research and I know that Cobden made all of these illustrations. He drew them all himself, and he used primary sources like this to help inspire them. So this illustration in particular is a secondary source. How can you tell the dressmakers are working at night? Well, you can tell if we look at the image here that we've got all these lamps on in this room as well. And you've also got the clock here, which indicates that it's like 1 a.m. Number 3, how are 2 of the women showing distress? So we've got a couple of women here. So we've got one over here with her hands over her face looking like she's crying, or she might be so distressed she's broken down a little bit. And 2, we have like a young lady here who just looks overwhelmed by the amount of work that she has to complete. Number 4, this source is a sketch of the same topic as source 1. Name 3 things that this source tells you about the working conditions of dressmakers during the Industrial Revolution. The source 1 does not. So I would say in comparison to source 1, source 1 didn't really acknowledge how many people were in the same room and how close they are together. So that's a couple of answers you could have for that one. Also, we've got a woman standing up here pointing. She might be the boss or a bit of an overseer. So that can contribute to one of your answers as well. Number 5, how accurate do you think this sketch is? What are some things that might make this sketch inaccurate? So inaccuracy, Cobden wasn't actually there, so he didn't actually see what it was like. However, he did use primary sources to make sure his drawings were accurate. So that's your answer for number 5. How do you think Cobden created this sketch? Who would have inspired him? So the young girl from the source, first source, inspired him to make this sketch here. Okay. Number 3, an extract from T.S. Ashton's 1924 book, Iron and Steel in the Industrial Revolution. This extract discusses the wages and working conditions of men and children. So let's begin by reading the source together. So we start off with, go home and their fathers do their business, but generally they work 6 or 7 hours and sometimes 8 or 10. They work and play pretty much as they like, subject to the control of their parents. So we're talking about kids so far that we know that. They generally are paid 3 to 7 shillings or 8 shillings a week. For adults, the working day was long. In the early years of our period, Ambrose Crowley's men were required to begin at 5 a.m. and work until 8 p.m. with a break of half an hour at 8 in the morning and an hour at noon. 13.5 hours a day or 80 hours for a full week. Towards the end of the century, the working day at Coalbrookdale was from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. with similar stops of a half and 1 hour for breakfast and dinner respectively. And quarter of a day's wages was forfeited for any workman who spent longer over his meal. So if you went over your break time, you lost a quarter of your wages. These conditions exhibit substantial improvement over those prevailing in a modern factory at an early period, and they contrast very favourably also with hours of toil required to wring substance earnings from domestic nail making. So this is saying this is better than what it was, which is pretty toxic. For here, during the war period, it was said to take the labour of an able man from 6 in the morning to 11 or 12 at night to make the 12 shillings, which constituted the average earnings of the trade. For these manufacturers of iron, the workers engaged in transforming the metal into nails. So they transformed metal into nails at this factory and other finished products. The account given here must be necessarily brief. Generally, such workers were engaged in nail ironmongers or other middlemen, and they carried on their operations in their own homes or in a small workshop under the type of economic organisation which, for want of a better term, is spoken of as the domestic system. So we are encountering a little bit of bias in this extract. Raw material was given out by the ironmonger and the finished product collected by him, and the worker receiving payment strictly according to his output. So this is saying how people were making nails by themselves and they got metal from an ironmonger. These ironmongers constituted a body of capitalists distinct for those who considered in this essay, but here and there the two industrial groups overlapped. So pretty much the people who gave the nail makers the iron were rich capitalists. All right, let's answer these questions together. Number 1, is this source a primary or secondary source? Why? It's a secondary source. It was made after the Industrial Revolution. and from what we can tell, and from the type of source it is as well, that this is a second-hand or a reconstruction of the past. Who created the source? Here we've got T.S. Ashton is his name. When was the source created? 1924. How can you tell the first paragraph is about children? Here we go. Because it talks about how they go home and they to their families and to their parents, and then they play whenever they like. So that's how you can tell it's about children. Number 5, how much do the children get paid? Here, 3 to 8 shillings a week. That's your answer there. What was the working day at Coalbrookdale? What was the working day? So I was looking for the hours. So in the early years, we're looking for Coalbrookdale, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. is your answer for number 6. Number 7, how long was their meal break? So let's zoom in again here so we can see that. So half an hour for a meal break. That's that answer there. What would happen if a workman went over his break? We read that you would lose a quarter of your wages. What hours did a man have to work at Coalbrookdale's nail-making factory to earn 12 shillings? So from here, during the war period, you had to work 11 or 12. So you had to work 11 or 12 hours. So from 6 in the morning, we can see here, to 11 or 12 at night. So that's a very, very big day. Who gave Coalbrookdale the medal and then collected the nail? So the ironmongers. We've got that information down here that we read together. All right, last source, guys. Here we have an illustration of a young girl working in a coal mine during the Industrial Revolution. Again, from John C. Cobden's book, The White Slaves of America. So is this source primary or secondary? You'll remember in previous videos, I've explained how Cobden wasn't actually there. He didn't actually go down during a mine to see all this. So this is a secondary source, and he created this illustration based on primary sources that he collected. Number 2, describe the working conditions of children who worked in coal mines. Use information from the source provided. Well, 1, it looks very unsafe, it looks very dirty, and it looks very confined and very small and very dangerous. So that would be my answer for number 2. Number 3, describe 2 of the dangers the girl has faced working in the mine. So we've got the mine collapsing. We've also got like constant exposure to this dirt and the materials down in the mine and the minerals. So you can certainly get like lung cancer and those types of things as well. Also being crushed by a mine collapsing. That was what I would say for number 3. What is the girl pulling in the cart? She's pulling coal. Number 5, what is the girl carrying in her right hand? So if we zoom all the way in, we can see a blurry sort of like pickaxe here. That's what she's carrying in her right hand, if you see that image there. And that is it for the sources, guys. So make sure you've answered those in your books. And then just very last, to finish off, to fulfill your to be able to for this lesson. So learning about how people gained rights in a workplace that we still enjoy today. Access the Education Perfect task called Life During the Industrial Revolution. And this is a really good one that Education Perfect has done to explain how people ended up gaining rights. So make sure you do that task there as well. So thanks for watching, guys. And remember, if you like using any of these websites or you want to stay updated to new websites that I make, please go ahead and subscribe.